All right, there we go. This shit still works. It does. It does, in fact, still work. Hooray. Let me grab this guy right here. Let's do this real fast. Actually, is it still going from the right mic? Yes, it does appear to be, which is very nice. Let's see. All right, grab that, put that there. There we go. And then this guy, put his ass down here, killed that guy, and we should be good to go, I think. Sounds like a reasonable prediction to a guy like me. Hey, what's going on, Phantom? Demi, Fox, Peanut, hi.
Very good odds.
How's everyone doing on this wonderful
attractive
Saturday? I genuinely have so little concept of time. I've been unconscious for most of the past 60 hours, I would say. It's Saturday, right? Yeah. It is. Hi there. Horrible? You know, hot. It's too hot. It is true. It is true. It is, I will say, about to board an 11-hour flight. Vancouver was interesting. I didn't really talk too much about the trip. I have things I like about Vancouver and things I don't like about Vancouver, but I certainly miss the weather. It is, in Vancouver anyway. If it's hot there, imagine what it's like for everyone else, man. I was in Vancouver it was like, that shit was some of the most temperate, like, weather that I've ever experienced for like 5 days in a row. Maybe I just got lucky, but it sure felt a lot nicer than the same days would be in Toronto. I was here, yeah, I was in Vancouver from like 2 Wednesdays ago until last Wednesday. Capitalism and greed and narcissism is destroying my life, and I can do nothing but play Guilty Gear. So true. Cuban beef, we got sandwiches incoming? If only. I mean, maybe. It's more like the US's one-sided obsession with destroying someone who's like maybe a little cooler than they are, as far as I can tell, anyway. But I mean, that will generate beef on the other side, very rightfully so. There is some problem here. We are going to have to figure out how this is gonna work, right? Because this using the platform you got for things like this. Yeah, I mean, the idea is to grow it too. Obviously, we'll shrink temporarily, but that's fine. It's just, you know, we gotta be doing shit. We gotta be educating ourselves. Those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. It's a very, very common, popular slogan, and unfortunately, it does seem rather true. And some of the people who know history are like hell-bent on repeating it, but like in brackets, like evil. You've moved away from fighting games warrants political contact? Basically, yes, Nargi. There's a video that just went up on the channel this morning if you want to take a look at it, but yeah. This means fighting brick is dead. Like, it's certainly not going to be a consistent thing anymore. Maybe a stream every now and then, just like for fun, perhaps. But yeah, it's not going to be the main thing I'm doing. That's up to you. If that, if this is not what you're looking for, that's totally fair. I wish you a wonderful rest of your life, and I appreciate all the support over the couple of years so far. You know that one picture of Vegeta with the book? That's Brick now? Yeah, I know. I can picture it exactly. He's got the purple suit on. He's like leaning up against like a bookcase in a library. I do actually need to get a library card. I used to have a library card, and It was sitting in the recesses of my wallet for several years, and now I've lost it. Maybe when I switch wallets at some point, I don't know. But you can actually get you can get access to a lot of cool books with a library card. So I genuinely should like go to my nearest library and figure that shit out. I think Toronto has some awesome libraries. It's true. The TPL, as it were, the Toronto Public Library system is pretty good. But yeah, so there's one thing here. There are a lot of like I even off of just a very brief amount of research, right? And I will certainly do more as we go. There are a lot of very cool books that I want to read, right? And not all of them are necessarily super long or anything like that. But they have a lot of very, just exactly. It turns out a lot of very smart people have written books on a lot of very interesting topics. And as a guy who knows nothing, they just, it's like when you get into anime for the first time, people can just recommend all the fucking hits. Like your friend gets into anime and you're like, oh, you should try like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood or some shit. So there's a lot, right? How can I leave such a medium handsome Canadian? I'll take that, honestly. That's pretty good. Yo, what's going on, Quagsire? So there's a lot going on, but there is a problem. I want to read these books, and I'm going to read these books, but I would like to bring you guys along for the ride where possible. There is one problem with this. I am pretty sure I can't just, like, read a book on stream. I'm pretty sure, because that is the same thing as kind of like it's like restreaming a movie or something like that, right? Well, 85 stream streak ends here. I don't particularly agree with your takes when it comes to politics so far, at least for the most part. Wishing you well, Mr. Brick. Stay solid. Listen, Nargi, I appreciate it being respectful at the very least. If you ever change your mind, feel free, but 85 is a good number to stop it at anyway, right? Brick's gonna popcorn read this to us. So I actually don't know how it is gonna work. Because what I know for sure is definitely, if I just like start scrolling and reading this shit out loud, I will only be saved by the fact that like I'm very small. You know what I mean? Like that is definitely some kind of copyright infringement. That is definitely something that could get my shit taken down. It's just a book, people will say, but it's because like I don't think I can do that. However, because I think from briefly looking at it, I think the problem is you're allowed to talk about like the shit that a book talks about and stuff. Pre-read and do greatest hits bullet point by chapter. Yes, I think that's what I'm gonna do from now on. I have not done that, or at least that was one of the ideas that came to me for things to do from now on. I don't think that I am going to. I'm not gonna do that today because I haven't. Right. Wait, should we actually popcorn it in a chord channel? It's an interesting idea, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if because I can't like share it like that. You know what I mean? A lot of these things are like DRM protected. It's not just like a PDF that I can post somewhere. But I think that's not a bad idea, Gumby, for like what to do moving forward. For today, I think I'm just going to try and like I think the problem is when you're basically competing with like an audiobook substream idea. I think it's a great substream idea, right? Ironically, I'm watching the stream and also the VOD of Paragon Line, best of both worlds. Yeah. Nargi, I like don't you don't have to explain yourself. Don't worry. I think it is going to get harder to stay away from political commentary as the world moves on, but I'm not gonna tell you what to do necessarily, right? You have your opinion, valid. I will see you later. And again, I thank you for the support on the fighting game channel and stuff that you've provided thus far. Probably illegal with just an idea. Yeah. I mean, we can like technically by that logic, like streaming a movie to your friend on Discord is also illegal, but like, but I think my understanding is that the issue here lies with basically audiobooking this shit, right? Like publishers want to be able to audiobook shit. Publishers want to do things. Right? If you gotta talk about books, think about it like a book review podcast. Yeah. So I think what I'm gonna do is for the future is I'm going to probably like read a little bit and then come on stream and talk about it. Right? But what I'm gonna do right now is we're probably just not going to, like, we're not going to get, like, the point is not just going to be to get through as much of this as possible. Maybe we'll just read some, talk about it, read some, talk about it. Like, it's not going to, like, it's going to be discussion focused, perhaps. Chapter summary only? That's not a bad idea too. That's honestly not a bad idea. But yeah, right now I don't know any of that shit, and I don't think this has like chapter summaries to begin with, right? Like, it is just gonna go, I think, straight into shit. Yeah. Right? So we're just going to be very like stop start in this
Very
shit.
good odds that this person.
And then
is
I think I will
incredibly
do better
constructive.
next time. I think I will like try and read some of this and then come back at it later. But you know, we will do what we can, because I was like fully ready. I was like, oh yeah, we'll read a book, it'll be great. And then like at 5:30, I was like, wait a second, I'm pretty sure I can't do this, right? I was like, I'm pretty sure I can't just, like, the same way that I can't like go on stream and just like watch a movie. I'm pretty sure I can't go on stream and read a book. So I am a little unprepared for today, but we will figure it out. And hopefully today will be the only day we do this. And you know, even if they take this VOD down or something, they won't like shoot me in the head repeatedly, so I'll be fine. Also, Fox, 24 months. Goddamn. It's been a while. Thanks for all the content, my man. As an activist in a similar area, I appreciate what you're doing. I'm gonna miss the fun, comfy gaming space this was, but I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, I mean, it's not going, it's not like it's always going to be like doom and gloom and horror, right? I mean, people like Wendigo and Meat Canyon do this on their podcast. Like, how do they do it, and how do they not get away? Because I'm very, anyone who, like, I did not have the chance to look into how people do this and don't die. How do they do this? I assume they don't show it on the screen. I assume that probably, if doing this, I imagine is probably a little bit more like tough. I think it's really interesting you're starting with Cuba as a topic. It really is, just because the video that inspired me to start doing something about like basically shifting my platform was about Cuba. And it seems like a very interesting, like, I think in my head I've always been taught to assume that it is like, you know, small country therefore irrelevant, but it sure sounds really relevant, huh? You don't try this hard to destroy a country that is irrelevant. So and you know, there are stories on Reddit that our books definitely do not show the passage. Yeah, I think maybe I won't do that. I saw you streaming about it before. It was very real. Yeah, so just, you know, I think after this, I might actually like turn the lens inward and after this, not after this book necessarily, but after like a few different things about Cuba, we might actually just go and be like, yeah, I'm Canadian. I don't know enough about Canadian history and the you know, all the disgusting things that I'm sure we've done to the indigenous people. Like, I just know broad strokes that we kind of suck. But maybe we'll do that afterwards. But for now, yeah, Cuba. There is stories on Reddit that are books, but they definitely do not show the passage. Yeah, okay. I think showing the passage, probably not a great idea. What do you think we should show instead? What do you think what would be a nice Che Guevara, my goat? We could just have a picture of Che Guevara up here. Does that sound good? and it just becomes sort of just talking about it verbally. For future streams, again, I can have like basically like a little PowerPoint or something up here that we have, but for now, yeah, we might just put up a picture of like Castro or Guevara or something. Fortunately, I have to get on a long ass flight, SMH, so I couldn't hang around for that long today. It's okay, Peanut. I'll be around in the future. See ya, boss man. See ya, Peanut. No, Canada only has nice people who say a lot, or so I've been told. True in some ways, very reductive, and a little propagandistic, maybe a lot propagandistic in other ways, but what do you guys think? We just go like... Oh, damn. Wait, this is kind of aura, no? The one with the cigar? Because you've always, like, I feel like you always see this photo of him, right? I feel like this is kind of aura, though. That's crazy. Legendary and majestic? God damn. I honestly, this is like a little spirit board, you know, like a little, what do they call it? I think so, something like it's like Pinterest boards for like inspiration. You know what I mean? Except it's all pictures of Che Guevara. His story is crazy as fuck. I don't know his story, unfortunately. A mood board, maybe, maybe. Vision board, maybe, maybe. That sounds right. I'm like trying to remember. There's like a word that all of my more artistically inclined friends use. Like they're like they make like a little, yeah, they get like a little inspiration board and then they can like make a design off of that or something. I don't know. But yeah, so I guess I will not put this up. I will read a little bit and talk about it and then we'll go from there. And don't worry, this will be significantly less scuffed starting probably tomorrow, but today I didn't think about it that hard until it was too late. Canada's just the US, but they hate the Native Americans with the ire that the US hates minorities. Sure. They don't, you know, we don't have the best track record with our own minorities either necessarily, but we may have been, yeah, we might be even more. I don't know as much about how exactly the US fucked over their indigenous population either, besides the fact that they just, you know, genocided them. But we may be even more hateful towards our native population than the United States, which is quite something, really. It's not exactly the most accurate way of saying it, but yes, something like that. Something like that. We sure did some shit. All right, maybe only every now and then I'll like pull stuff up and like highlight it directly or something, but so here's the deal. Here's the skinny, as it were.
Nerd.
Thank you for the follow, Cranberry. Also, I saw you say it earlier, not even Grand Blue Relink. I mean, very true. What can I say? Sometimes the streamer scams you. It's just kind of that shit that happens. From what I've seen, I haven't done research in a while. Please educate me if I'm wrong. Genuinely on Canada. I mean, we do hate our natives. it's a damn shame, but we gotta do, yeah. I don't know if you ever heard about like residential schools in Canada and shit, but like it is some of the most like fucked up shit. Well, I mean, I don't even know if I could say it's some of the most fucked up shit you've ever seen, because like the bar is just so high these days, but it is incredibly fucked up. And we stopped like the program, like the final residential school closed or something like that, like in like 1992 or some shit. Like it is not even, you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, you know, in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, like we were abusing our native population. It's like no. Like it's like there are people who are like 32 years old who are like alive, who were born before the last residential school closed down or some shit. But yeah, okay. So I got it on my one slide. I got chat on the same slide. On the same monitor. We got this Che Guevara mood board over here on the other side. Let's talk about this book. So this book was recommended as a source in the description of that Boy video by Salim Lamrani. I'm saying his name like it's Arabic. I'm not actually sure if it is, but Salim at least strikes me like that. It is called The Economic War Against Cuba. And apparently it is a pretty nice historical summary. He's a professor of Spanish and Latin American Studies at the University of Paris Sorbonne. Sure. But yeah, so it is a summary, apparently not that long of a book, just judging by the scroll bar, of all the shit, right? All the shit that has been going on between the US and Cuba, aka mainly all the ways that the US has tried to blow Cuba up, as far as I'm aware. As far as a table of contents, there's a prologue, there's a foreword, and then, so what does this book talk about? So this book is only 74, 75, 76 pages long. So this is not a particularly long book, right? There are 8 chapters and a conclusion. The first one is Castro and the Cuban Revolution, sure. The second chapter is Economic Sanctions from Dwight D. Eisenhower to Barack Obama. Oh, damn. Okay. So that is... See, not a long book means there couldn't be too much we've done. Well, you know, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Only 74 pages of war crimes. It could be worse. But yeah, Economic Sanctions from Dwight D. Eisenhower to Barack Obama. That is, I mean, that is a long time period to cover in what, 23 chapters, looks like? Yeah. Seems like it's the meatiest chapter of the book, but The impact of the economic sanctions on healthcare. United States justice contends with the economic sanctions. Extraterritorial applications of the economic sanctions. This is probably regarding how it like affects other countries, how they have to play into that shit, right? All my fellow tolerant leftists, something like that. It's a little scuffed today, but don't worry, we'll have something besides a Che Guevara mood board tomorrow. The U.S. Government Accountability Office report. I actually don't know what that means. The opposition of American society to the economic sanctions, and then the final chapter, which is really quite something. Still got Zangief and Grand Blue as the tags. Love to see it. Oh, do I? You know what? I'll fix that tomorrow. Let's call it. Let's keep it in there for fun. I don't think the tags on Twitch even do anything. I'm not gonna lie to you. Hades 2 as well. It's in there. You know, the thing is, Zangief is a Russian. Zangief is well educated. It's all political, okay? What if you kept them and make them woke? Where is Zangief? He's right there. It's all political. Zangief's existence is political. But yeah, the final chapter in this book is called Attempted Genocide ? Which is interesting. It's only 2 pages long. So I don't know I don't know what that means. But the final chapter of this book is called Attempted Genocide ? And it goes from page 72 to page 74, where the conclusion begins. So, I guess we'll see. All art is political, playing Grand Blue's political act. Exactly. Galleon is political. Unironically, actually. As much as I was making, like, just a joke about, like, gooning. Yeah. Okay, so I guess let's just get started here. And I will not just audiobook this shit to the best of my ability, but my political queen. I do, you know, definitely support the author here. Buy the book, read the book, especially if it turns out to be good, I guess, which I've heard it is. But I am just going to kind of read this, and then we can pause every now and then to talk about it, I think. And if I get shot in the head, I get shot in the head. It'll only be one day. Okay, so there's this prologue. Aphelian damage. It's true. By Wayne S. Smith. Who's Wayne S. Smith? Let's actually let's learn about all these people who purport to talk to us. Hello, Wayne S. Smith. American diplomat, academic, and author. He published 4 books on the topic of Cuba and U.S. relations. So you're saying he knows a little bit? You're saying he knows? Oh, he died recently. That's, you know. He seems somewhat based like that. Yeah, at the very least. I'm not saying he isn't. I'm just saying I literally just looked up the guy's name for the first time in my entire life. That's unfortunate. Rest in peace. What in the check? Welcome back, Brick. Hello there. It's a pretty tip of the iceberg material, but in the off chance you haven't watched it, you haven't watched much of it, basically every episode of Last Week Tonight on YouTube for free, by the way, are great peeks into how fucked so many of the current US systems in the US are. I've seen a little bit of Last Week Tonight, but not a lot. Maybe that is something. I don't know how I feel about being a professional photographer anymore. It feels strange to capture so much life and beauty when people rot and burn for little more than living. Art is important, man. Art is important. Capturing the life and the beauty it reminds people what they have to fight for, right? Like, it is, I would not feel bad about that necessarily, you know? Like, if you are in a position of privilege, use it to help people. You don't have to, don't just, like, paralyze yourself with guilt and do nothing. I understand your point, but capture the life and the beauty and remind people what they're fighting for type shit. You know, like, natural photographers, for example, are a really great example of what we stand to lose if we keep fucking up our climate. But okay, so Wayne Smith, in my professional opinion, I guess it seems like you know what you're talking about or whatever. Fine. Let's see what he's got to say. It's a prologue. He says, in the economic war against Cuba, a historical and legal perspective on the U.S. blockade, that is the full title of the book, Salim Lamrani presents us with an excellent summary of the American economic sanctions against Cuba, the manner in which they have been imposed for more than half a century. That is always crazy, right? Bad things are always happening. Art is too. Yeah, and then, it is necessary. It is necessary. And the harm they cause the Cuban people, particularly in terms of access to certain medicines. Makes sense. At the same time, his work demonstrates these sanctions have failed totally to achieve their objective. That is the interesting part, right? Because, like, the thing that I'm very curious about is you know, this feels like a massive power imbalance, doesn't it? Like the concept of like, you know, the United States of America, maybe the most powerful empire in like human history. I don't know. It's hard to really power scale because obviously they have modern like technology and shit. But it's like who was more influential? Probably. I mean, I feel like it has to be a relatively recent one because of the globalist stuff that's happened, right? Like the U.S. has like influence over like Asia in a way that like I don't know, like the ancient like French Empire wouldn't have or something, you know. I say ancient, like medieval, like the medieval French Empire or something would not have had nearly as much influence. So probably, I mean, probably the most powerful empire in the history of the world, maybe like only competing with like the British Empire or something. And then, you know, a country that for all intents and purposes, even if it is, you know, naturally resource rich, one, I assume, is getting those resources like forcibly stripped out of it by these imperialist countries. And then two, is just a lot smaller. So it's like, one of the things that always surprised me when I learned that the U.S. has been like sanctioning Cuba to hell and back and like basically now is blockading them for 50 years is I'm like, how have you not, like, not that I'm rooting for the U.S., but it's like, how have you not gotten the job done yet, right? Like you'd think the company, not the company, you think the country would be like a hole in the ground by now. Like I know they're gonna do everything short of like literally nuking it or something, but it just sort of feels weird that it's like you can't get this done. Like you can't like fully, like how is the leader of Cuba still the Communist Party? Like how is it actually? Maybe I'm wrong and it's not, but when I looked it up, it looked like it was. It's just a little embarrassing, right? Because he says, yeah, how the sanctions have completely failed. When it's first presented to you, they use such passive language that I thought it wasn't even happening anymore. No, it's like apparently just straight up been ongoing since the 60s or some shit, right? It's like, brother, this blockade is like 3 times my age, and it feels like it's accomplished less than I have, and I haven't even accomplished that much. Goals to never get it done, be in limbo forever? Maybe. I would think that the goal would be, you know, either, you know, kill everyone in the country slowly through like starvation, or at the very least like regime change, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but I figured the goal would be regime change eventually. Like, that's happening too? No, I don't mean to make light of it at all. It just feels like, I don't know, inefficient? The country, a lot of it just comes down to the country itself being incredibly resilient, I suppose, right? Anyways, where did I stop? These sanctions have failed totally to achieve their objective, which is nothing less than the overthrow of the Cuban government. Right, that's what I'm saying. I am surprised they have not managed that in 50 years, or 60, or whatever, right? But I mean, I guess it is a testament to the popularity of the government. Because if you have I assume, right? If you have an unpopular government and them sticking around causes you all this headache, and when I say headache, that's a very, very light word to use to describe that shit, right? It's like starvation and death and famine and everything. I wager that they will be out of here by now. Some kind of regime change would have been enacted, but it doesn't seem like that worked. Think about Afghanistan, mission accomplished, and they never left. No, sure, yeah, but that, I mean, that is also a huge blow. Maybe they're just bad at doing things, because well, that was also just they lost a lot of money. Did they actually end up with any kind of regime change in Afghanistan? I think they might have, and then they just gave it, like, it ended up just like the Taliban runs the country now anyway. I don't know if that was their goal in the first place or what. We're gonna have to like see more examples of just what the fuck the American empire has been up to get a sense of like what their point even is, right? The important context here is this is all proxy fighting grounds of the Cold War. Sure. Okay. So, although this failure is obvious, the United States government continues to pursue its objective vigorously. One might even say this pursuit has become an obsession. As Salim Lamrani points out, Cuba does not represent a threat to the United States. The Cold War ended a long time ago. I wonder if that's true. It doesn't feel like the more it doesn't feel like that's true, but I guess in name it did, because the Cold War was the USSR, and the US and the USSR doesn't exist anymore, right? So, Shimabot, by the way, thank you for the sub, much appreciated. But sure, the Cold War ended a long time ago, and the United States has normalized its relations with China, with Vietnam, and several other former adversaries. Fair, okay, I see what you mean by that. Still, it obstinately refuses to do the same with Cuba. I wonder why. The inability of the United States to interact rationally with Cuba can only weaken its position in Latin America. The global order of things has changed. There was a time when other nations, with the notable exception of Mexico, obediently followed the American example by isolating the island. But this is no longer the case. The United States is now the only country in the hemisphere that does not maintain normal diplomatic and commercial relations with Cuba. Oh, really? I was under the impression that everyone was still kind of like, you know, the U.S. was telling them how like to jump, and they were asking how high. I was not aware that, like, I assume, like, this says it's only the U.S., so I assume it means that, like, Canada is, like, conducting business with Cuba normally and shit. And I guess you can like fly there from Canada, so I guess, yeah. In this regard, the U.S. finds itself isolated, and to this day, its inability to offer a more rational policy position vis-a-vis Cuba undermines its claims to global dominance. Interesting. That's a loaded claim. I'm not even saying I disagree with it. It's just like, I wonder how much it hurts the U.S. to be doing this. I could absolutely see that there's just like if it's just this like McCarthyist like fear of communism that is leading them to act in a way that is like actually not in their best interests, just because they are like so terrified of anything that starts with the letter C. But Sure. Finally, as Salim Lamrani demonstrates, the American people no longer endorse the state of affairs. Sure. On the contrary, polls indicate that an immense majority of American people now favor a normalization of relations with Cuba. Only a small percentage of Cuban-American hardliners, mostly in Florida, of course, it's fucking Florida, huh? Insist that the country maintain its anachronistic and counterproductive policy toward the island. It's imperative that we consider what this policy implies for the efficiency of our democratic system. I mean, this is pretty common, right? Like, this is... I feel like a lot of the American imperialist stuff that they do is nowadays significantly less popular than it used to be, but they just do it anyway, right? Like, I mean, the most obvious example probably is the Israel-Palestine stuff, right? Where I feel like even among a lot of like Republican voters, for maybe different reasons, but like, you know, the whole Israel project, at least America's involvement in the whole Israel project, is not very popular. But even though a lot of Democratic voters don't like it, a lot of Republican voters don't like it, they just do it anyway because it's not about representing the people, right? And I guess this is saying it's a similar thing, right? You know, if a lot of folks in America do not fuck with what's going on in Cuba, but they keep it up anyway, then it's like, well, who are you doing it for? Because it doesn't seem like you're doing it for your, it doesn't seem like you're doing it for your constituents, at the very least. The tone of this work is serious. Okay. It provides an integral vision of what our policy towards Cuba is and has been for 50 years. Yeah. Fascism needs an enemy to convince people to drink the Kool-Aid. It's true. All right. So there's a foreword here by Paul Estrade. Marco Rubio is especially crazy about Cuba. Who's Paul Estrade? Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but French academic. Hello, French academic. Oh, he's still chilling. Yo, what's up? He's holding on. Oh, his Wikipedia page is in French. Hold up. French academic, Hispanist, and historian, professor emeritus in Paris 8. Is this how they does Paris have like multiple different universities that they just name with numbers? There's like University of Paris 1 and 2 and 3 or something. Authored work on Cuba and Puerto Rico. Sure. Born in Paris, awesome. Union of Communist Students, French Communist Party. Okay. So we fuck with this guy. I mean, I assume because he's writing the thing for this book, right? But it's interesting. When I see names, I am interested to see what they're about. McCarthy fucked the American perception of politics so hard irreparably. We definitely got to look into that shit at some point too. There was a book that I saw that was very interesting. Hold on, I can find it again. It was the Jakarta Method. Washington's anti-communist crusade and the mass murder program that shaped our world. This seems like an interesting book, doesn't it? I haven't like bought this or anything, but it does. It sounds familiar anyway. All right. So let's read this forward and then we can get into the book proper, I suppose. What's the name of the guy who wrote that big smear piece on Che Guevara? I remember hearing about it in a video by Overzealots, but I forget the author. I don't know. Does anybody know? The big smear piece on Che Guevara. I imagine there were a bunch of those, right? But maybe there's like a particularly famous one. I'm a bit of a silly guy. That's I'm uneducated. That is why I'm currently trying to educate myself. But maybe it was Marco Rubio. This book presents a little-known reality, equivocal, even consciously obscured. Okay. In any case, underreported by the media that are charged with selecting and analyzing information. The mainstream media, multiple but unambiguous, hide a reality that Salim Ramrani is working to restore. Cuban institutional specialists, in quotes, and the quote-unquote special envoys in Havana certainly mention the existence of an embargo. There's a lot of quotes in this, in their commentaries concerning the difficulties endured by the Cuban people. They always mention it in the same way, as briefly and as vaguely as possible, through the turn of phrase or even with a single word. Yeah, right. It's a lot of that mentioning it out this corner of your mouth using passive voice. It is part of the playbook for sure, right? You'll be able to find it. I'll come back. Basically, it's one where they made up a quote to portray him as a murderous maniac. Oh, fun. Fun. They cannot deny, of course, the existence of the embargo, but in their analyses, they treat it as though it hardly exists. Thus, they see no need to recall its origins, its changing motivations, its illegal character, its perverse modalities, its unbearable length, and its deplorable effects. The flow is crazy. Goddamn. They often fail to even name the country responsible for it. That is, yeah, it's just like somewhat like that. That is like the most passive voice shit I've ever heard. It's like Cuba's being embargoed. Oh no, right? Like who could have done this? Like it's actually the fucking Eric Andre turning back and shooting Hannibal Buress and being like, who did this? Right? Humberto Fontova. Interesting. This is the fellow who wrote the smear piece. Humberto Fontova. That last name sounds like almost like Russian or Slavic. It's interesting. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong though. For them, the embargo is an incidental factor without importance, a mere circumstance devoid of meaning and consequence. When they deign to mention it, they turn it into an alibi or even a boon for Cuba? How? And as Voltaire said, that is exactly how history is written. But what a strange coincidence this convergence is. Of course, one cannot contend, now less than ever, that the only cause of the present serious economic stagnation is Cuba, due to the blockade imposed by all U.S. administrations since 1960s. Since 1960. Wait, what? One cannot contend, now less than ever, that the only cause of the present serious economic situation in Cuba is due to the blockade imposed by all U.S. administrations since 1960. So, there are other reasons then, I suppose? The drastic reforms being carried out in Cuba prove the contrary. Still, some argue that the Cuban... I feel like I read this and my brain has not properly processed it. Still, some argue that the Cuban government has for decades used these unjust sanctions afflicting its people as propaganda designed to minimize its own errors and the shortcomings of its system. Oh, I see. But if this were the case, one would need to explain why the United States has not ended the sanctions. Indeed, ending the sanctions is something that is near unanimous... that a near unanimous United Nations General Assembly asked it to do each year. I see. So they're saying, like... It's not like the blockade is like the only reason that Cuba is struggling economically. But people act like the Cuban government hides behind it as a shield, and if the US was actually interested in harming them and it was like removing it would be taking away a shield for their bad actions, it wasn't actually doing anything or something like that, then why don't they do it, right? It's sort of like a proof by contradiction, I suppose. Yeah, the UN asked them to do it. They said, go fuck yourself. Makes sense. How does the UN work again? And don't say like it doesn't or some shit. But isn't it there's like countries that have veto power or something, and if they like if everyone is like, hey, do this, and they're like, no, we're not gonna do it, they get to just make the resolution not pass or something. I thought so. Damn it, I was gonna say it doesn't. No, like yeah. But like in theory, like how would it work? I thought there are like 5 countries that have like veto power or something, right? But I don't actually know what that means. Like I don't know in practice. I know the US is one of them. World War II winners, Security Council. Sure. The EU? The UN. Like I know, like if does the UN have any power to actually force a country to do something? Like not force like militarily, but in the sense of like does the UN actually have any power to go like, we think you should stop doing this? And like, is there some sort of agreement that people are supposed to follow it? Like, is it some kind of, it's almost like an international court? Like, is it like a crime to be in breach of the thing that the UN decides or something? And maybe the answer is yes, but like, who cares? I don't know. Not really? Fair. Valid. All they can do is collectively sanction and try and influence behaviors? Sure. Less martial law, more mandate. No, they do not. They basically say it would be great if you didn't do that anymore, and countries can be like, sure, lol, thanks. Interesting. So it is just kind of like, it is, you know, it is like pressure and, like trying to like maybe ostracize countries to an extent and stuff like that. But when it's like a powerful enough country, I guess, like what the fuck does the US care if the UN tells it can't do something, right? And I imagine in certain ways, the UN is a lot less able to tell, like, even to suggest to the US that it shouldn't do something. Then the US force votes it down anyway? Right. They don't have a military, so it's up to member states to actually enforce things. Gotcha. There's a couple mods, but they can't really do anything but silence you on the forum. Right. And if you're certain countries, they can't even do that, right? Like, I'm pretty sure they can't, like, tell the US shit, right? It's basically the thing where if you're rich enough, you could do whatever and just pay the fine for it. Sure. In October 2010, for example, the US is the mod? Oh, yeah, sure. That makes sense, yeah. The Discord mod is corrupt. In October 2010, for example, 187 states, 180, I didn't even know there were that many countries, I'm not gonna lie to you. I guess there's 192 member states of the UN or something. For example, in October 2010, 187 states with only 2 opposed, the United States and Israel. Oh, amazing. And 3 abstentions, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. That's interesting. Those are all very, like, small countries, right? I wonder if those are basically, I wonder why they would abstain. Once again demanded dropping the sanctions when they voted yes on the resolution titled Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial, and Financial Embargo Imposed by the United States Against Cuba. Now, either the embargo is outdated, expensive, and unnecessary, in which case those responsible should renounce it immediately, or worse, the embargo is a convenient excuse for the Cuban government to hide its faults, in which case it would also seem judicious for its instigators to drop it. Yeah, sure. Yet they persist in maintaining it. Democrats as well as Republicans, Obama as well as Bush, yes. You know, a lot of this imperialism shit is bipartisan, right? Like, it tends not to be, at least bipartisan as far as the 2 parties in the United States. It tends not to be really a matter of Democrat or Republican. Same shit with, at least, like, the establishment Democrats, right? Same shit with, like, the Israel-Palestine stuff, and, like, I assume, every other imperial horrificness that I'm going to learn that the U.S. is doing. Probably the Vietnam shit back in the day, I imagine, was bipartisan as well. I think there's some fucked up shit they're doing in Indonesia right now. That shit's probably bipartisan too. Imperialism is a bipartisan matter. They both fuck with that heavy. In the face of world opposition, against the majority opinion of their own citizens, against the vital interests of a Cuban population victimized by the state of siege. How? Question mark. Why? Question mark. For what reason? Question mark. Is the reason incumbent Dems are more mad at progressives than they are at Trump? Right. Salim Lamrani is not content simply to underscore the human suffering caused by an embargo that was imposed in another century, think of the boycott of Haiti, and has ravaged the island for more than 50 years. He examines point by point the stages of its development and its effectiveness, places it in a historical context, and considers it from the perspective of international law. This is kind of back to the UN question again, but like, so like when I break a law, right, I can be arrested and I can be put in prison. And sometimes, even when I don't break a law, I can be arrested and put in prison, but let's ignore that part. But like, if I break a law, I can be arrested and put in prison. What is international? But like, if, say, there was this concept of like law in my country, and when I broke a law, like nothing really happened, then the law doesn't really exist, right? Like, I can have my own moral code, and there could be like social ostracization, and there could be things like that. But if, as like, you know, there's like the concept of like, if this justice system wants to claim that it exists, and that nothing happens when you break any of its rules, then that certainly seems like it is sort of not really a thing, right? Does international law do anything? This is not like this sounds like a leading question, but I hear all of these, like, I feel like all the time whenever people are like, people, oh, like this ruler is breaking international law, this ruler is breaking international law, this ruler is breaking international law, right? And it's like, it doesn't seem that anyone is facing any consequences for breaking international law. The International Criminal Court technically can charge states, I think, and people, but again, it's only enforced on those who can't defend themselves in more conventional ways. Fair. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, like The Hague, like the stuff they, you know, like they tried all the Nazis at the end of World War II, but they had to have lost first, right? Like when the Nazis had like a fully functioning military and economy, they couldn't really do anything to them, which makes sense. They would have just resisted. So it's like when all the people who are guilty of the war crimes are also the most rich, like the richest and most powerful countries on the planet, I guess it's like, what is the plan there? Like what do you do? Yeah, I guess it does seem kind of rough that if you are powerful enough, you are just exempt from the law, but I suppose this is what it is. He has little difficulty pointing out, that's basically it. Yeah. What Thaco said. He has little difficulty in pointing out its iniquities. Iniquities. That's a good word. I've heard that word before, and I feel like I can sort of figure out what it means in context, but I don't actually think I know. Immoral acts. Gotcha. It's kind of weird to think there's more incentive to take them down and take their riches. Yeah. But I guess they probably set up the whole system in the first place and then put a little exclusive clause for themselves, right? At the same time, he does this without pomposity and without acrimony. Okay. As is his habit, he rests his arguments on primary source materials, most of which are official documents published in the US. In doing so, the author built upon specific facts and dates while presenting a wide range of official opinions. His tone is measured, even sober, but he is prolific in his exposition. Is all this too serious? The business at hand hardly lends itself to humor, but we can smile here and there while reading about the follies the strict application of the embargo entails. You gotta laugh so you don't cry, I guess. I think some other useful context here is the average age of our senators is like pre-Ice Age. They have been basted in the height of Cold War rhetoric, so our inability to let go of these archaic ideas about foreign relations falls out along those lines. That makes sense. Product of their time, except like, yeah, like it's instead of product of their time making your like grandma a little bit uncomfortable to be around. It makes them want to kill everyone who thinks differently than them. I thought, yeah. Interesting. In the words of American judges, we learned, for example, that importing dolphins from or selling pianos to Cuba are actions detrimental to the interests and the eternal security of the United States. Interesting. Ridicule never kills, but the blockade does, certainly by banning irreplaceable medicines from being exported to Cuba. Selling pianos to Cuba, yeah, no, sure. Whatever. Call what you will, blockade or embargo, the economic sanctions leveled against Cuba are groundless. The pretext Washington uses to justify them go up in smoke one by one. Furthermore, who can seriously pretend that Cuba has menaced or might represent a menace to the United States? Yeah. We all know which country has been the aggressor throughout history and which has been aggressed, notably since 1959. We are also quite aware that the Bay of Pigs, where mercenaries tried to land in 1961, is in Cuba and not in California. Sure. Then dolphin exports? No, it's the imports. Exporting dolphins to Cuba, I guess, is fine, but importing dolphins, you can't do that shit. You can also import pianos, but you cannot export pianos to Cuba. It's a very precise and specific business, you see. We also know, or should know, that when New York's Twin Towers were brought down, the Cuban government immediately offered help, and when Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, Cuban authorities spontaneously offered their disinterested aid. I assume disinterested, they mean like without interest. Like this is saying disinterested in like an academic sense. Like they didn't have like an ulterior motive. Not that they were kind of doing it half-heartedly with a side. All this has occurred despite the tightening of the embargo. The undisputed success Cuba has achieved in the fields of education and health, culture, and sports has been achieved in spite of the embargo, the cost of which, aside from the expenses generated by the various aggressions and menaces of armed intervention, was evaluated in October 2010 by the Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez, at more than $750 billion in today's money, or 2013's money when the book was written, for the past 50 years. This is money that could have paid off many public debts, beginning with those of Cuba. $750 billion. That's crazy, man. $750 billion. That's a lot of money. That is more than the GDP of a lot of countries, right? AKA more than 1 year of U.S. military budget? I don't think it is. Didn't the budget go up recently? I think it's less than 1 year of U.S. military budget. Actually, wasn't the U.S. military budget like always over $1 trillion, like for a long time? Are you defining imperialism? And if the USA was imperialist under the same definition, how would you call it now? But certainly not the same stance. The post Cold War Trump era stance. I'm not sure how I define imperial. It's one of those things where it's like I kind of know it when I see it. It is a country going out into the world, enforcing its influence on others and then harvesting them for resources generally, which I'm not sure has like changed that dramatically from pre-Cold War and post-Cold War. But if you have a strong belief that the US is like no longer an imperialist nation or something, then I suppose that, you know. Post-Cold War and Trump era stance, you mean? You say post-Cold and Trump era. So you mean like the post-Cold War era, post the Cold War and post the Trump era. Anyway, gotta head out, but I had to poke my head in after I saw your YouTube thing. Appreciate people wanting to be the change I want to see, want to show some support. Yeah, I see it, man. Separate eras? Yes. The Cold War, yeah. But I don't think it's certainly not the same stance. Like you're saying, the Cold War stance and the post-Trump era stance is different. Yeah, maybe. A lot of the fundamental principles sure feel like, you know, similar, even if they're fucking with different countries now. Maybe it's less like entirely focused on communism, possibly, just because they feel like they kind of mostly won that war. Who knows? Anyway, $750 billion. That's quite a lot of money. Does that mean that it cost the US $750 billion, or that it costs Cuba $750 billion? I assume it's the latter, right? What did it say here again? It said everything Cuba achieved in spite of the embargo, the cost of which was evaluated by the Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs. So yeah, it cost Cuba $750 billion, which, you know, goddamn. Venezuela, bruh. I mean, yeah, they're still doing, don't get me wrong, they're still doing their anti-communist shit, but what does the term the latter actually mean? The former and the latter. Like, if I say two things, well, maybe you say you mean like the etymology of it, but if I say like, it could either be A or B, and I think it's the latter, then I just mean it's B. It probably has a very similar etymology to the later, is my guess. Sorry, I'm a dumb high schooler. No, it's cool. I imagine later and latter probably have very similar etymologies, right? But yeah, like the first one and the second one. Like if it could be A or B, and I think it's the former, then I'm saying it's A. And it could be A or B, and I think it's the latter, then I'm saying it's B. Literally, as in like in the order I said them. You know what I mean? It's referencing the order in which I brought up ideas, and then pointing one specific one out. But I mean, I imagine it has almost the exact same etymology as later. Yeah, from the Old English comparative adjective. I don't know how to read the AE, but like latra, which means late, right? It is directly related to the word late and shares a root with later, right? So it is, imagine that I went, I think it's the later. It's just, that would, at least maybe that would make more intuitive sense, even if it would sound weird, to go, it could be either this thing or this thing, and I think it's the later one. Then, later in the context of literally, I said it later than the first one. But yes, moving on. Despite the incongruity of this permanent state of siege and the enormity of the suffering it causes, the author does not use overly emotional language, nor is he ironic, nor does he resort to invective. Invective, I think, is like insults, right? Even shows some consideration for Barack Obama and acknowledges the positive steps that he has taken to loosen travel restrictions on Cuba. But how much more his reputation would be burnished were he to order the lifting of the embargo. Oh, yeah, because this is 2013. Right. Oh, wow. Because when the thing said sanctions from Dwight D. Eisenhower to Obama, I was like, I wonder why they stopped there. Because this book was written in 2013. Obama was still president. God damn. That was a long time ago. because they're still talking about it like it's like, well, Obama could choose to lift the embargo. It is crazy to think about like this shit 13 years later, and it's like, nope, still here, still here. The Nobel Peace Prize he received somewhat prematurely would then appear to have been justified. Yes, no, maybe so. France, through its representative to the United Nations, regularly votes in favor of the resolution that advocates lifting the embargo, but the commitment of France ends there. Elsewhere, in Africa or Asia, France advocates for the environment and follows an aggressive policy for the protection of civilian populations that it applies, unfortunately, in quite an arbitrary manner. He's a French academic, right? So I guess that's why he's talking about France and France's activities. Salim Lamrani does not tell us what we should do, but his rigorous expose would be in vain if friends of justice and the rule of law did not seize upon it. We must circulate this book, which is at once strong and relentless. We must indignantly pursue the state of siege, struggle against it, and contribute to its unconditional end. Okay, so that was all of the forewords and the prologues and all of that. Mostly, yeah, just talking about the blockade stinks. The U.S. is not doing a great job. And also just glazing the book a little bit, which is, you know, that's fair. I'm interested to see what the book actually says now. But yeah, let's get into the actual book proper. Maybe because I am a little unprepared and this is a little scuffed, maybe we will try and get through this first chapter about like the introduction and then the chapter about Castro and the revolution. And then we'll see where we're at. I might end a little early, read some more of this, and then prepare something for tomorrow. This guy's actually got to do work before his streams now. He can't just boot it up and play a video game. It's tough. But let's see. Introduction. Since 1960, so that is 66 years now, in case you were keeping track, the U.S. has imposed unilateral economic sanctions upon Cuba. Unilateral meaning one way, right? Cuba obviously is not sanctioning the U.S. It's just one way. Sanctions that affect all sectors of the society, as well as all categories of its population. Since February 3rd, 1962, when President John F. Kennedy made the decision to isolate the island completely, these sanctions have been total. So, like as in, literally nobody can trade with them, right? Like, the U.S. will engage in no trade with Cuba whatsoever, and I assume that they are also going to tell everyone else that they have any amount of influence over, which is a lot of people, to also not trade with Cuba at all, right? This network of sanctions is unique in terms of its length, its thoroughness, and its sophistication. It is also retroactive and applies to events that happened before the legislation was adopted, and extraterritorial. It extends to other nations, and is therefore in conflict with the norms of international law. Like, they are sort of trying to force a policy upon everyone else. Like, you also have to sanction Cuba, or else we're going to be very mad at you. Maybe even sanction you back, I imagine. It is crazy they can just do that, right? But again, you're rich and powerful enough, I suppose you don't get, you can just do whatever you want, even bullying other rich, powerful countries into following your example. According to the U.S. government, the embargo on Cuba is the most comprehensive set of American sanctions ever imposed upon a country. Sure. Established at the height of the Cold War in hope of overthrowing the new revolutionary government directed by Fidel Castro, the sanctions are still in effect more than half a century later, regularly reinforced by successive administrations, Democratic as well as Republican, with the notable exception of the government of Jimmy Carter between 77 and 81. Interesting. Did they, stop for a sec? I mean, the other chapter will go over it, but... And to a lesser degree, that of Barack Obama. They are based on several legislative actions. The Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, so that's after the blockade started. I wonder if that was created just for the purpose of this. The Cuban Assets Control Regulations of 63, the Torricelli Act of 92, the Helms-Burton Act of 96, the Trade Sanction Reform and Export Enhancement Act of 2000, and the U.S. Commission for Assistance to a Free Cuba of 2004 and 2006. I guess it is really weird. When I read that, I go, oh yeah, the U.S. Commission for Assistance to a Free Cuba. Oh, they're gonna help. And I'm like, oh wait, no. This is literally, this is the meme, right? This is the freedom. Freeing Cuba means killing everyone who's there who doesn't agree with us, and then putting in a bunch of people who think that what we're doing is awesome or something. That's yeah. We're going to free the country, guys. We're going to liberate them of their resources and their thoughts and their minds and their free will and their system of being. The economic sanctions have a considerable impact upon the daily life of Cubans, notably in the field of health.
Makes sense.
Indeed, the United States, whose multinationals hold a virtual monopoly in this sector, also prohibit the export to Cuba of drugs produced in the U.S., in violation of numerous international conventions. Yeah, but it's like, who cares? Like, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's just like, the international conventions don't seem to be doing anything. I mean, I guess it just highlights that it's like fucked up, that they're just like, we don't care that this goes, because the underpinning principle is that international law is supposed to be based on like virtuous and like morally good treatment of countries by countries, right? And like of states by states, I suppose, right? So the if that assumption is true, then like willingly going against it for some reason or another just to further a goal, I guess it does like highlight that your shit is fucked, that you're just being a little evil about it. But it really does just start to, it feels like it loses all meaning when I just keep hearing over and over and over again about how everyone is breaking international law constantly and nothing is happening about it. And it's like, okay, well, what are we doing then? Like, why do we even have the international law if it only exists? But I guess, honestly, I was gonna say, why do we have the international law if it like only exists to like fuck up smaller, weaker countries? But I guess it's kind of the only reason we have fucking law, like I say actual law, but like civilian law too, right? Like, it's not like anyone gives a fuck if like Jeff Bezos breaks the law, but they sure give a fuck if like you or me does. So like, I guess it's just, why not? It's just applying the concept internationally. I shouldn't be too surprised. What do you think happens with Cubans who don't agree with their government? I don't know. I know that the best way to generally, if you want to, like, if a government exists in a country and it is not great, starving that entire country is usually not the best. If you want to help them, you don't do it by starving the entire country. Like, something that I can tell you that I have a little bit more knowledge on is there are a lot of Iranians who don't like the Ayatollah, right? There's a lot of Iranians who don't like the Ayatollah, and that regime is certainly not, it's not, you know, I don't think I'm a particular fan of them either from what I understand of it. But I also don't think that if the goal is to help the Iranians, then we should bomb them until they decide to revolt or something. I don't really much care for the whataboutism, right? There are a lot of countries in the world that have a lot of issues, and certainly, yeah, like, it's up to the people in those countries to organize and fix things for themselves. But I don't think that a world police, incredibly powerful country that has been proven multiple times to be acting in its own interests, with the pretense of, oh, we're helping the people, we're freeing the people here, right? I don't think that country going around and starving people is like the best way to go about helping these people, right? If the idea is like, oh, well, the Cuban government is like evil and corrupt and we need to help the Cubans, then we do that by not letting them get access to like medicine and food and power and water. Then at the very least, you sure sound a lot like the corrupt Cuban government that you don't like, and at worst, you might be more harmful to the populace than the actual incumbent government. So it's not really, the whataboutism is sort of irrelevant here. Since it said it best, you children want to act like the real UN, or they just want to squabble and waste time? I mean, who's gonna tell them? The economic, oh yeah, we talked about this. You have monopoly on drugs, whatever. The Justice Department relentlessly pursues offenders who fail to respect the restrictive regulations imposed by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, an agency established by the U.S. Department of the Treasury, allocating for this purpose considerable resources for prosecuting individuals and legal entities that maintain economic, commercial, or financial relations with Cuba. This is to the detriment of national security and the protection of U.S. citizens from terrorist attacks, as revealed by a government report that deplores the obsessive focus on a nation that poses no threat to the United States. One of the few intelligent channels on YouTube, thank you. I don't think I'm more intelligent. In fact, I am rather uneducated, right? I don't know very much about most things. That's why I'm currently trying to educate myself. I just, you know, right place, right time. Well, I don't know if anyone is in the right time right now, but we do our best to educate ourselves. We do our best to change our minds when faced with new information. And that is certainly what has happened to me over the past few years. In fact, a significant majority of the US population would like to see the economic sanctions lifted and relations with Cuba normalized. But their wishes come up against the intransigence. Is this why people who read have such good vocabularies? Intransigence is a noun meaning the stubborn refusal to change your views, ideas, or behavior, or an absolute refusal to compromise with others. I see, so it's just like giga stubbornness. Yes? Gotcha. I do love when I have a second level word, you know? Like, it's one thing to call someone stubborn, but like, intransigent? Oof. I'm gonna keep that one in mind, right? It's like, in Gurren Lagann, when the anti-spiral calls... Oh, I forget the names of all of the characters who aren't Simone. But like, Simone's partner, he calls her like, recalcitrant. I remember that. I was like, damn, that's like, it's like, you know, you can call someone like disobedient, or you can call them recalcitrant. It's like a level 2 word, you know? It's really good to have level 2 words. I like intransigent. I'm a big fan of that one. Anyway, people want the sanctions lifted. Gurren Lagann mentioned, let's go, it's true. But their wishes come against the intransigence of a minority of Cuban-born U.S. legislators, as well as the heirs to the old regime of Fulgencio Batista. Fulgencio Batista. I've heard this not the first name, but I've heard this last name before, Batista. And to my usually when I hear it, I don't think it is received. I don't think I hear it and then nice words about it often. Fulgencio. Oh no, it's not Fulgencio. Sorry, Fulgencio Batista. Dave Batista? No, not Dave, but a different Batista. Not it's Batista, not Bautista. That's, you know. There's Bautista and Batista. Dave Batista seems cool enough. You know. He was good as Taga. Cuban-born U.S. legislators, as well as the heirs to the old regime of Fulgencio Batista, who have so far skillfully managed to block all legislative initiatives aimed at relaxing the state of siege imposed on the Cuban population. Sure, yes, there are interests that want it to keep going. Havana accuses the U.S. government of attempting to starve the Cuban people by imposing extremely difficult living conditions, hoping these will trigger an internal revolt that will lead to regime change. Right, yeah, I mean, this is... That sounds reasonable, because it's like, you know, the goal, I assume, is to get the people who you don't like out of power. It's like, regardless of whether or not you're justified in liking them, this sure does seem like one way to go about it, though. I say the goal is the goal seems to be that because that seems to be what the U.S. does most of the time. Like nowadays, because of the modern military or just modern like general diplomatic thing, it is not. I was gonna say it's not as easy to just boots on the ground, invade someone, and remove them. But I guess they literally did that shit with Maduro, right? But usually, you can't, like, if you want to regime change someone, you can't just, like, well, I guess they also blew up the Ayatollah, right? But you know, they had really finished the job, I guess, so his like, son just took over. Never mind, honestly. Maybe I just don't have a point here at all. Pluma Meridium. Apologies if I'm butchering your name, but thank you very much for the follow, much appreciated. What I was gonna say is I was like, the modern diplomatic landscape, I think it's a little harder to just go, oh, we don't like this foreign leader, so we're just going to kill him and replace him with someone else, right? So they have to do it through like these roundabout means of like riling up the populace against them, yeah, like starving the populace and assuming that the reason, like having them like know that this is happening because of the regime. So if they change, if the populace like revolts and rises up and unseats whoever's in power, then, you know, we can swipe in and fill the power vacuum with one of our own guys, whatever. But it does, I mean, they sure have just straight up taken Maduro out of Venezuela and also blown up the Ayatollah. Like, I wonder why. Part of me is genuinely curious why they didn't just, because if they could have, they would have, right? I assume. If they could have just killed every like communist politician in Cuba and then replaced them with like U.S. vassals, basically, I assume that they would have, because again, they've literally kill or remove in some way, right? Because they've done it before, right? So like, I don't know why. It feels like it should have been not too hard to do too, right? Because it's a small country. Hey, what's up, Faffy? Hey, Brick, just watch your new video. Let's go. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. Let's go. Wait, yes. I was like, is that right? From each according to his ability to each according to his need. Yes, man. I think I honestly, I have not really studied up on like what communism as a system means right now either. It's just more so capitalism sure does not seem to be working out very well. But that sounds right. That sounds familiar. I think that sounds like a cool sentence to me. But yes, trying to lead to regime change for its part. Havana accuses them of trying to starve them, so regime change happens. For its part, Washington has never hidden its determination to subvert, by whatever means necessary, the established order in Cuba, even since the fall of the Soviet Union. The study does not purport to be exhaustive. Rather, our intention is to sketch a brief historical overview of the economic siege enacted by Washington and bring some legal perspective to it. Sure. It also aims to shed light on the far-reaching U.S. policy affecting the development and welfare of the Cuban population. It also attempts to shed light on the reasons why sanctions have been maintained nearly a quarter century after the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. We're now over 30 years, right, past the fall of the Soviet Union. A period during which Washington normalized its relations with China and Vietnam and is on the verge of reaching an agreement with North Korea. That ever happen? Again, this is 2013, right? But let's read the manifesto sometime. Break book club. I'd be interested. I would. Definitely be interested in reading a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of like black communist thinkers and stuff too, who I feel like I have heard have very interesting takes on the matter as well, and very interesting takes on Marx himself too. It's all about, you gotta get intersectional with that shit. But I mean, I imagine Marx is a pretty good primary source to at least read some shit. All right, so let's read about this Fidel Castro fellow. I feel like this is a name that I hear very much, just because I exist in like a Western country, right? I feel like this is a name that I very much hear in like mixed contexts. I feel like I often hear this person talked about with a lot of like love and support, and I often hear this person talked about with a lot of like villainization, right? I assume it's sort of just par for the course with any sort of communist leader, right? I loved Fidel. Yeah, sure. I'm not even saying like. I'm just saying like as someone who is uneducated on my history, but obviously much more sympathetic to like the left-leaning like communist side of things, right? I'm inclined to agree with you, but I just don't know any, like, if you told me name one thing that Fidel Castro did in his entire life, I was like, I don't know. I think maybe he was the leader of Cuba at some point, like I am very uneducated, so I'm trying to fix that right now. But just noting that like this is definitely a controversial figure at the very least if you live in a capitalist country, right? It's okay, I'm still learning too. Yeah, we're all still learning. I'm not like necessarily embarrassed at the fact that I'm uneducated. It's just important to recognize it and then do something to fix it, which is what we're currently trying to do. Maybe I'll go to Cuba in my next life, maybe. All right, so Fidel Castro and the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. Who said anything about starving people? The regime refuses to comply with free elections, etc. The USA embargoes them. Their economic system fails to provide. It's the USA's fault. Capitalism literally works. I don't know if you are arguing in good faith here necessarily. There are basically no countries, like every country on Earth right now, including the United States of America, is reliant on external trade with other countries to maintain any kind of comfort or standard of living for their populace, right? There are basically none countries that are entirely self-sufficient, right? The U.S., how many trillions of dollars in trades does the U.S. do with other countries, right? If you embargo a country totally, and then you also tell every other country that you have influence over, which are the U.S., you're a very powerful and rich country.
Very good odds that this person is incredibly
so that is
smart
most other countries that could trade with Cuba in North, South America, Europe, and Africa, right? Like the only countries you like don't have enough influence over to bully are like China, Russia, and countries in their sphere of influence, right? So if you cut a country off entirely from all world trade, you are starving those people, right? Like that is what's happening. I literally don't know enough about the existing Cuban government to tell you that like your claim about refusing to comply with free elections, etc. is wrong. I'm not even gonna challenge that, right? But my point is, if you embargo a country totally from all kinds of trade from like almost every country in the world, you are starving that country. And if your goal is to free them from a tyrannical government, and that is how you're going about doing it, then yeah. And if your point is that a country that is cut off from all basically trade globally with any country can't provide for itself and therefore their system has failed, then one, almost that there are very few countries on Earth that would have a functional system, right? In that sense, maybe none. I couldn't say, but like the U.S. itself would not would collapse basically. If tomorrow the U.S. couldn't trade for anyone with anything, the country would collapse. So capitalism wouldn't have worked, I guess, in that case, right? And even if that is true, if we're like, well, we're just proving their system doesn't work, if you're doing it by starving a bunch of their people, then are you just like debate broing it? Like, are you just trying to, like, you're like, it doesn't matter that all of these people who are not part of the government that refuses to accept free and fair elections, it doesn't matter that those people are dying, but we're proving that their system doesn't work. It's like, it's at the very least, at the most generous, a pretty Pyrrhic victory, right? Like, we're killing a bunch of like innocent Cubans who aren't part of their political system to prove that communism doesn't work? Seems weird. I have seen the Boy video, Lotus. We talked about it last Sunday. History night, by the way. Thank you, French Toast, for the 11 months. But yeah, man, I don't think I'm going to answer you anymore because I don't think that you are actually considering what I'm saying. I'm not even taking that hard line of a stance here, right? Because I am not educated enough to. Like, I am not even telling you that, like, no, the Cuban government is awesome and perfect and you're lying about it. You very well could be correct. I am not very educated about, like, the internal workings of Cuba. I have mostly only heard a lot recently about how the US has been sanctioning them basically globally, right? Even if the government is pure evil, they got the Nazis in there, right? Hitler is the current Cuban president. This is still not the way to go about it. Yes and no. It makes their country poorer. Their system requires them to trade with capitalists is funny, and they're dying or starving, but hella poor. This is progress. It does make their country much poorer. When a country gets poor enough, there's not enough food and water and medicine for everyone, right? Do you see that? And a system that requires trade is not, that's not funny. Like, why, you know, like, most countries in the world are capitalist because the US does this to communist countries, right? So if you need, like, countries need to trade with each other, and the fact of the matter is, most of your neighboring countries, if you are a communist country, are going to be capitalist because all the ones that weren't got basically forced into being capitalist by the United States, and they're currently trying to do the exact same thing to Cuba, right? Now you can be like, oh, well, the United States was able to militarily enforce its will on all of these communist countries, and that means that it's better and it won. Sure. When it comes to basically invading, occupying, and destroying other countries, I think capitalism is significantly better at that than communism. I'll give you that free, right? That I'm not even gonna like, yeah, absolutely, right? It is. I think it is. It's like it's not even close there, right? But like, the fact that like every country has to trade with other countries. If you are a communist country, most countries around you are going to be capitalist just because of, you know, the history of the world. So if you have to trade with countries, you're going to end up trading with capitalist countries, right? Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily that doesn't prove a point, really, anything, right? And also, they are dying and starving. Yes, like if you're saying they're not dying and starving, they're just hella poor. I would embargo the fuck out of Hitler. Oh, see your worldview leftist. Sure. My point is more so is, do you think that the best way to deal with Hitler is to kill all of the Germans that aren't Hitler? Like all of the, like, just Germans who happen to be living under a dictatorial regime? Anyway, I don't think we're making that much progress. Hitler is dead? Right. We did have to kill Hitler, right? They're not doing that. If the Cuban government was Hitler, then why didn't they just kill them? It was very globally acceptable to just go in there and shoot that guy in the head. No one really had anything bad to say about that except the guys on his side, right? So if it's that bad, you really just you just go in there and kill the guy, and pretty much everyone will help you because he sucks, right? So it's not that. So why are they embargoing it this hard and killing everyone? Anyways, It's okay. You are very clearly not arguing in good faith, right? I think you, from what I have gathered, you're like, I see your worldview, leftist. You would support Hitler. Amazing. Awesome. I'm going to see you never again. I think I do want to have a lot of I do want to have a lot of empathy for the idea that we live in a very propagandistic system, and it's very easy to get brainwashed and just end up believing a bunch of shit that is like dissonant and contradictory, and that only benefits people who have like millions of times more money than you do, right? I get it. So I do want to have some empathy for that, and not like every time someone says something that is like remotely conservative, I'm going to just like shoot them. But I think you can also tell at some point when someone is just that I think this person was looking for like a debate bro style own and not actually to talk about anything, right? They always found the least well-defined part of what I said and twisted that into something else, and oh well, right? I wish them the best in their journey of enlightenment. I think the funny thing is that America didn't embargo Hitler at all. I think a lot of large American manufacturers actually made shitloads of money off of them around that time. Yeah. I think I'm again not that sounds like what I've heard before though. It's true. It's true. Until the war started, of course. All right, let's keep going here. Henry Ford in particular, right? Obviously, once the war started, there was no like I don't think so, actually. I was gonna say once the war started, I don't think any American weapons manufacturers were like secretly selling weapons to the Germans, but honestly, at this point I wouldn't be surprised. All right, let's read this Cuban Revolution chapter here, because let's see like what are the origins that one chatter seemed to think that the current Cuban government was basically like a classic tyrannical like dictatorial government. I don't know enough really to tell them that they were wrong. Let's see at least how it started. To my understanding, this Cuban Revolution and the Communist Party that took over is, I think, the same one that still has power in Cuba. Doesn't mean that everyone who's in there is the same kind of personality as Castro, but let's start somewhere. Fidel Castro and the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. The triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959 and the rise to power of Fidel Castro immediately provoked the hostility of the United States, sure, whose faithful ally, the dictator Fulgencio Batista, was overthrown by a popular uprising. So this was actual, like, regime change implemented by the people, right? At least from the Cubans' point of view, then, this would have been some kind of, like, this is what, you would think should happen to quote-unquote tyrannical governments, is the people should organize, people should overthrow them, and, put someone else in their place. I'm sure that because the United States' goal is the liberation of the people of Cuba, that when they saw this, they were very happy. The Eisenhower administration had struggled to maintain Batista, the perpetrator of the March 10th, 1952 coup, as a head of state, and thereby prevent a takeover by the rebels of the 26th of July movement. Okay, I'm unfamiliar with all of these terms, unfortunately, but sure. On December 23rd, 1958, it's fucking Christmas Eve almost, a few days after Batista fled the island, the National Security Council, taking notes of the insurgents' inevitable advance from the Sierra Maestra toward Havana, had suggested through a voice of President Dwight D. Eisenhower that a military action might be needed in Cuba. I mean, all of this so far, right, is referring to it in the context of just they are trying to maintain their ally in the region, right? Maybe later in this chapter, it's like actually Castro was committing hella war crimes, and that's why they had to stop him. But so far, that does not seem to be the U.S.'s motivating factor here, right? It just seems more so that they like Batista. But sure, Alan Dulles, some kind of German name possibly. The director of the CIA at the time specified that we must stop Castro's victory. Sure. I do like this quotes, like this uses quotes from the American government, right? Thus, as Christian Herter, Undersecretary of State, noted, the rejection of a regime dominated by Castro appeared to be unanimous in the US government, right? But it was too late. On January 1st, 1959, Batista fled aboard a plane destined for dictator Rafael Trujillo's Dominican Republic. I've heard this name before, too. I might be saying that wrong, but yeah, Trujillo, I assume is how that's pronounced. Trujillo? I've heard about this fella too, and I don't think I've heard very nice things about him either. Yet at the time, it was impossible to build anything resembling a strong link between Fidel Castro and the communists of the Popular Socialist Party. Oh, actually. Was he not always just like a out-and-out communist or something? The first provisional government was composed of rather conservative members of civil society. Interesting. The judge Manuel Urrutia was named to the presidency of the Republic, and Jose Miro Cardona was selected to fulfill the function of prime minister. No communist made the list of new directors, and Washington was satisfied with the composition of the new government. Okay. So I guess it isn't like Batista's gone, but they're like, okay, well, but these guys might still be able to play ball with us, right? The only major thing I know about Fidel Castro is that he fucking loved milk and dairy products. What an interesting fact. Me too. So like I guess like twin, like in that sense. Washington was satisfied with the composition of the new government. Okay. So I guess it is mostly an anti-communist thing then, which makes sense. It wasn't just, okay, well, Batista, we just want to keep Batista there in any chance. I assume they expected, because the reason they would care about Batista in the first place is that they want an ally there so they can have influence in the region, right? So I assume they figured because of the more conservative government that was put in there that maybe they would be able to have a similar working relationship with them. On the 6th of January, 1959, so this is like a few days later, during a meeting of the National Security Council, the CIA underscored the fact that Urrutia was fiercely anti-communist and that Fidel Castro had chosen him personally. Oh, both those things are in quotes, fiercely anti-communist and Fidel Castro had chosen him personally. They saw the presidential cabinet as composed, therefore, of, quote, moderate and reasonable elements, unquote. The agency had also rejected the accusation of anti-Americanism on the part of the leader of the revolution. Quote, Fidel Castro has often expressed his desire to have friendly relations with the United States. Interesting. The sharp criticisms directed at Washington were the result of, quote, U.S. assistance long extended to the Batista regime, end quote. Sure. By February 1959, the dignitaries of the Batista dictatorship had emptied the coffers of the central bank and fled the island with $424 million. Washington, refusing to extradite the war criminals of the old regime, rejected a request for a loan from Cuba to stabilize its currency. This was the first sign of the hostility to come. Yeah, so they drained the central bank of money, and then Washington did not help with that, which, I mean, it's not like it's their requirement or something. To provide that foreign aid, but it's definitely a sign, right? I wonder why though. Like it seems so far like there's no problems, right? Like they're saying that they don't have a problem with Castro. They don't really like the people he appointed are like fiercely anti-communist, and that was one of their big concerns. I don't know. The first economic and social measures. Maybe this is why. The first economic and social measures undertaken by the revolutionary government did not sit well with Washington. The stranglehold that U.S. multinationals held over the Cuban economy was so strong that it became impossible to undertake any reforms without affecting their interests. I see. Like the American multinational corporations were so entrenched, like they were so dominant in the Cuban economy that, yeah, if you were like, oh, we're raising taxes on corporations or something, like you basically are just raising taxes on American companies and making it harder for them to operate in that location, right? As Ernesto Che Guevara, I've heard that guy's name before too. As Ernesto Che Guevara recalled, that's the guy with the cigarette right there, or the cigar. Except for land reform, all of the economic and social measures undertaken by the revolutionary government were nothing less than responses to the United States' aggression. I feel like I'm missing a little bit of context here. What measures were taken? Oh, they're going to get into it now. Okay. The May 17th, 1959 agrarian reform, one of the most advanced of the period. Agrarian meaning in regards to like agriculture and shit. No? Or am I silly? What does that word mean? I think it means like with regards to agriculture. Yeah. Relating to fields, farming, land use, or rural life. Yeah. Same root word as like agriculture. Gotcha. One of the most advanced of the period was predicated on the legal foundations of Cuba's 1940 constitution. Sure. It aimed to allocate the farmers cultivable land that would allow them to meet their own subsistence needs, as well as put an end to the latifundia system that had long prevailed in Cuba. Indeed, Article 24 authorized, subject to compensation, expropriation for the public good. That's another word that I need to... Expropriation. What does expropriation mean? The land process where a government takes private property from an owner without their consent. Gotcha. Yeah. So this is, like, this is where... This is at least what I start to recognize as communism, right? Just the sort of forcible redistribution of property by the government, right? Taking private property from people and giving it to, I suppose, like, I'm not sure, like, to farmers in general, like, splitting it up so everyone had, like, maybe more of an equal share. I'm not sure exactly what the process for this was, but this is where you start to see some shit that would definitely get the US pissed, right? What is the latifundia system? Like, this is gonna be a really long Google, but you know, system Cuba. Does the AI have anything useful to say here? The latifundia system in pre-revolutionary Cuba was a land model where a tiny fraction of wealthy owners and foreign corporations, largely from the US, controlled the vast majority of the productive agricultural land. Oh, okay. So just, like, capitalism. Basically, I mean, sort of how things work here, right? Like, the vast majority of, like, workable land is just owned by, like, corporations and, like, rich folks and stuff like that. Fine. So this is something that, I mean, you do start to see how this could piss the US off too, because, like, if Castro and his government do this kind of shit and it works and it, like, makes people's lives better, then it does point the finger. If it doesn't work, then awesome, right? But if it doesn't work, you just let it happen, you let it burn down, and you point at it and you go, like, if you are, like, a capitalist and you are, you know, not happy with the idea of communism spreading, right? You just let them do it, it fucks up, it explodes, and you go, ha 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 ha, look at that, aren't you glad that you live under this system? But if it works, then it's a really bad sign, right? 'Cause it's like, well, they did that over there and it worked great. Like, that sounds a lot like the system like the latifundia system that they were under there. Sounds a lot like what we're going through. Why don't you do that here? And then you have to answer a bunch of very uncomfortable questions, right? Expropriation for the public good. It is a vague term, I will admit. Right? I feel like there is always the issue of, like, who gets to decide what the public good is, for sure, right? I will not be... I'm not going to be shy about the fact that a lot of the anti-communist propaganda that I have been fed throughout my life certainly is still sitting in my brain and, like, affecting me, right? Not, like, it's just any system, I assume, is going to be very viable, or very, not viable, very susceptible to abuses of power by those in power, right? So it's sort of like, I do wonder what the general... Because the general answer to this that, like, our modern, like, you know, capitalist system has is sort of like, it doesn't, like, I don't know. Like, it's sort of just like, yeah, like, abuses of power are, like, a thing, and, like, everyone is sort of discovering with the Trump administration that a lot of the quote-unquote checks and balances placed on the president of the United States seem to be a lot of pinky promises and hoping the president plays nice. And it turns out he can just do a lot of shit and, like, no one can really stop him. So it's not to say that it's, like, uniquely a communist problem, but I definitely could see the issue of, like, expropriation for the public good. What is the public good? Who defines the public good? You know? It's an interesting question. Article 90 prohibited the latifundia, thereby substantially limiting the concentration of land. Sure, yeah. So again, ostensibly at least, I imagine the goals of this government would have been to make it so that, you know, the land that the farmers were working was owned by the farmers, right? At least based on my very vague, like, threadbare knowledge of communism, that sounds like, you know, the generous presentation of the idea, at least, right? If the farmer is the one working the land and getting the value out of the land, they should also own the land and potentially, you know, get some cut of, or maybe all of the proceeds of the land that they work, right? As early as June 24th, just about a month later, 1959, Washington, for the first time, began to consider the imposition of sanctions against Cuba. So they did some pretty unabashedly communist shit, and a month later, it's already like, okay, we got to do something about this. In an internal memo, the Eisenhower administration suggested the possibility of ending the sugar quota. I assume the sugar quota is some amount of, like, they have a deal that they will trade some amount of sugar, right? Americans don't even own their homes. The state can grab them at any time. It's true. The bank, well, the bank owns your home while you have the mortgage, and I think, like, I think, like, ostensibly you own your home once you pay it off, right? But yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it does seem to be held up by pinky promises and the idea that it's like, oh, well, communism sounds great as long as the government is like nice and you don't have anyone with any like mean intentions. It's like, well, yeah, people have gotten their homes broken into and have been disappeared by ICE overnight, right? So it's like, well, you own your home, sort of, right? As long as the government's nice about it, you own your home. Yes, my daughter's grandmother paid her home off before she died. Yeah. They can, I mean, even outside of like traditional, like the laws and the fine print, the government does also just have like the monopoly on violence, right? Like if at any point they decided they really wanted your house, what are you going to do, right? Like how are you going to say no to, like, say you are just like an American citizen? How are you going if they decided they wanted you out of your house? You can't really do much about that. And you know, it's my understanding that has happened a couple times before. Okay, so sanctions, sure. In an internal memo, the Eisenhower administration suggested the possibility of ending the sugar quota, which I assume is some amount of sugar they agreed to trade either from or to Cuba. And they need to make levies? They have to talk to homeowners. The State Department openly acknowledged this objective. The sugar industry will suffer a rapid and abrupt decline that will entail general unemployment. I'm sorry, levies? Okay, I was like, Levi's? The jeans? It's like, whenever the government needs to make new denim jeans, they have to talk to the homeowners and kick them out of their houses. Yeah, no, I got you. The State Department openly acknowledged its objective. The sugar industry will suffer a rapid and abrupt decline that will entail general unemployment. Many persons will be without work and go hungry. All right, for the guy earlier who was like, their goal is not to starve people. It's a direct quote from the State Department. I don't know. It is well to remember that in 1959, Cuba relied upon the U.S. for 65% of its exports and 73% of its imports. The Cuban economy was, therefore, totally dependent on the U.S. market. Moreover, U.S. investments in Cuba were carried out under conditions often favorable to the multinationals. Thus, for the exploitation of nickel, the Batista regime had granted a concession to the Moa Bay Mining Company. This contract was so profitable that in just 5 years, Moa Bay was able to obtain a return of $120 million on its initial investment. Is it crazy to me? Like, that doesn't sound... I know it's like 1959, but I'm like, that actually doesn't sound like that much money on like a corporation scale just compared to the shit. Like, this insane, like, rapid explosion that we've had recently where it's just like... You know, we have so many different, like, well, not so many, but, like, way more, like, trillion-dollar market cap companies than you would expect, right? It's, by the way, the same thing that China's doing with North Korea. They're, in a sense, fully reliant on China's supplies. Yep. China does, at least to me, seem to be doing a similar thing to the U.S., at least in terms of, like, expanding that kind of soft power through trade relations and like reliance on materials and stuff. I could not tell you with any certainty how much they're abusing that, but they always do have, like, they have put themselves in a position with a bunch of countries where they are able to do that, right? It is another thing where it's kind of like, hopefully China is going to be nice to me and not decide to fuck me over someday. Is there a way to look at how much that would have been back then? Yeah, we could go like $120 million in 1959 worth today. This will be USD probably, but inflation calculator. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's like a bill. It's a billion. It's $1.4 billion. That is pretty good. I would call that a lot of money. You know what I mean? Because that was what in 5 years they made $1.4 billion. This is not. Like, it's just, this is like a company, right? This is not like, I don't know. Is Moa Bay Mining Company like some gigantic, like, Exxon Mobil level company? I don't know, right? But I mean, $1.4 billion from like operations in like a country as small as Cuba, right? That's a lot of money for sure. Those enterprises were often exempted from paying taxes and were allowed to repatriate their profits. Exempted from paying taxes. Sounds familiar? They therefore contributed little to the development of the Cuban economy. Right. They made all their money in Cuba and it got sent back to the States. Like they are using Cuba's supplies and Cuba is not seeing any of that benefit, right? You could argue that they're seeing benefit in the sense that, well, that's why the US is trading with them so much, is because they have like this very profitable relationship for like their multinationals. But that is sort of like, that's almost like a conditional, like, yeah, you could argue that, right? But it does seem kind of weird that it's like, let me exploit your land in return I'll trade with you. Like, it feels like there probably is like it does not seem like a very equitable relationship, right? You could certainly make the argument of like, okay, well, I'm a big country, you're a small country, like I am gonna exploit you, but I feel like that is sort of maybe the wrong mindset to go about it. Just because that's how it works doesn't mean that maybe that's how it should work, right? That's like a good thing. Between 1950 and 1960, the balance of payments was favorable to the United States to the tune of $1 billion. So if that is $1 billion of 1960 money, then that's like, yeah, that's a lot more, right? On August 27th, 1959, on the recommendation of Washington, the U.S. electricity firm American Foreign Power Company, very creative names back then, canceled a $15 million investment intended to upgrade the Cuban electrical grid. The project had been in the planning stages for some time. This measure, an action that signaled increased hostility toward the Havana government, was taken following the new government's 30% reduction in the price of Cuban electricity. There's a footnote here. Let me go. I want to go skip to this footnote. Oh no, it'll be all the way at the end of the book, I assume. Oh, I can click on it. It links. Perfect. Oh, it links to like a whole like paper. I see. That makes sense. The government just... That's one thing that I am confused about, is like the government just reduced the cost of electricity by 30%? How do they do that? You know? Supposedly, my guess is that this was just like a lowering of the profits being seen by the corporations. Like they were forced to charge less, so they made less money. Like I assume the person who took the hit there, or not the person, but like the entities that took the hit there would have been the corporations, and that's probably why they were so mad about it. Was taken following the new government's 30% reduction to the price of Cuban electricity. I do wonder how this... Maybe I just don't know what communism is, because I do wonder how this ended up... Like, if everyone that got appointed to this board, were they just wrong? Like, was the State Department, the U.S. State Department, just, like, incorrect in their assessment of Castro and the people he appointed? Because I do wonder if it really was all of these, like, fierce anti-communists and all of these fierce, moderates, conservatives, etc. How did this happen? But this also could just be a case that this is what moderates look like, and we are just completely, like, you know, our politics in Canada, certainly, and in the US as well, are, like, so far shifted right that, like, we look at, like, a mild redistribution of, like you know, they lower the electricity by 30% or something, and we're like, that's communism. The expropriation sure seems like more directly communist, though, right? Like, that does not seem like a moderate policy. Like, the kind of, like, forcible repossession of private property by the government. So maybe I just don't know, but that does not seem like a moderate policy, right? So I wonder how that happened if the people who were in Castro's government were as the US State Department claimed they were. The only two explanations that I can see are either that is not actually a hyper-communist policy and I don't understand communism, or they were just wrong. They had the incorrect intel about these people. Hard to say. Because it's only like a month after they came into power, right? So it's not like they had a ton of time to change their minds about how they were going to do things. The United States was not the only country affected by the nationalizations of the electricity grid, right? Most European nations, Spain, France, the UK, and Switzerland, for example, also had interests in Cuba, if to a lesser degree. That makes sense. These nationalizations were carried out in accordance with international law that grants any nation the sovereign rights to nationalize companies operating on its territory in exchange for compensation. Sure. The amount of compensation paid was based on the enterprise's most recent corporate tax returns. They gave you money based on how much tax you had paid, and if you had just been avoiding paying taxes, then you got nothing? Is that real? The amount of compensation paid was based on the enterprise's most recent corporate tax returns, Returns that were, for obvious reasons, often less than the real value of the assets. Agrarian reform vouchers bearing a 4.5% interest rate were issued to owners affected by nationalizations. That is funny. I mean, it is like, I feel like when you do, like, you kind of know that you're fucking them over when you do that, I will say. I feel like, right? Because, like, you know that all these motherfuckers are not properly paying their taxes, right? So when you're like, we'll give you money back based on how much tax you gave us, then I feel like it's one of those, like, you're technically, you know, you're technically correct, but you know what you're doing, right? Like, you know that this is gonna piss people off. All of the nations affected by the expropriation process negotiated with the Cuban government and accepted global compensation agreements, all with the exception of the United States. Damn. It's crazy. I mean, that is truly something, man. It's not like these, you know, European countries are like saints or anything like that. So it is wild to just be like the only country who's still like, no, I want to keep exploiting your shit. The Eisenhower administration demanded as a minimum standard an indemnification rapid, adequate, and effective for the nationalization of U.S. assets. Making tax evasion impossible would piss a lot of people off. Yeah, well, it's more so just that because these countries are like, they're being nationalized, so it's not like they're not even going to necessarily pay taxes anymore. It's just that the nationalization of these companies is supposed to come with a financial compensation to the governments of the countries that are no longer going to be able to make profits off of this. They just tuned it, like they punished them for tax evasion, right? Like they tuned it to how much money they had paid in taxes, which was like zero a lot of the times. Which is, it's funny. Like it's like trolly, right? I thought the title was a lie. Nope, we're here. It's like funny, but also it's like, I am not surprised that pissed, you know, a lot of people off. But what is an indemnification again? I you know, forced to look up a lot of words. It's nice though. A legal promise where one person or company agrees to pay for the losses, damages, or legal costs of another party. Okay, so they were like, pay us damages. Gotcha. So Eisenhower wanted, as a minimum standard, an indemnification, so a payment of damages, rapid, adequate, and effective for the nationalization of U.S. assets. However, this procedure is not recognized by international law, which prohibits a third country from imposing conditions on sovereign nations. That is to say, involving itself in that nation's internal affairs. Indeed, this principle of sovereign equality has been universally accepted since the Congress of Westphalia. Damn, bro, I know about that fucking shit from EU4. The Congress of Westphalia in 1648. This agreement is older than America itself by over 100 years. Okay. And is based on two essential principles: the sovereignty of states and their equality before the law. State sovereignty is expressed through the right to freely determine their internal and external affairs without infringing on other states or violating international public law. Legal equality consists of the right of any state to be considered the equal of any other in matters of sovereignty. Sure. Thus, all sovereign states are legally equal and without risk of subordination to another, supposedly, independent of economic, geographic, demographic, or physical factors. This principle is inscribed in Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, which states that the organization is founded on the principle of the sovereign equality of all members. Gotcha. So if I'm understanding this correctly, Cuba had set up its process for how it was going to pay back the companies that were being nationalized. Well, I get the governments of the countries, I think, that are being nationalized, and the U.S. did not like it. They did not accept it, and they tried to impose they were like, no, you have to do it like this, which is not correct. This might be the one thing I know about more than La Diva. You know what? I'm happy to have you here, Gabba. This is gonna be we're gonna be doing a whole lot of reading and learning. And you know a lot about La Diva too, so that really is saying something. But yeah, so I guess they were like, you can't do it this way. I don't know if you do. I don't know if you know this, but I do have a degree in history and political science, and it's my current master's studies. I do know this. I have watched your stream a couple times before. I'm aware. That's why I'm saying I'm happy to have you here. So the U.S. is like, you can't pay us back like this. You got to pay us back like that. But apparently you can't do that under international law. But I don't think the U.S. gives much of a shit, right? Sure. Moreover, on December 21st, 1952, during the 7th session of the United Nations General Assembly, if you want some books and/or documentaries, hit me up literally whenever. I absolutely would want. I will hit you up for book recommendations often, probably about different topics. On December 21st, 1952, during the 7th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Special Resolution number 626, approved by majority vote, states that the right of peoples to freely use and exploit their wealth and natural resources is inherent in their sovereignty and in accordance with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. This is what is commonly called economic self-determination. Okay, yeah. You get to use, like, countries are entitled to their, like, countries and the peoples within them are entitled to their own resources, and, like, it seems reasonable, right? It seems almost self-evident. An inalienable and imprescriptible. I mean, it looks like the word prescribe. Prescriptible. An adjective that means a right, claim, or law cannot be lost, taken away, or canceled by the passage of time. Sure, just another word for unalienable, I guess. A lot of theaters in European countries, for example, do not have any money whatsoever, being at zero, so to speak. Expenses are handled via proposals to the government, and profits, if any, will go back to the government, which is what they were doing with the companies here. Yeah. Right. That makes sense. It's a nationalized company, right? Like, it is owned by the government. Like, it is essentially just a function of the government. It's not like which is what seizing the means of production means. Perhaps. It was, again, I'm not at all correcting you on this because I just don't know enough. But it was my understanding that part of seizing the means of production was supposed to be in regards to, like, the people. Like, not just the people in government, but the people themselves, having control over, like, you know, the workers. I actually don't know what this, like, you know, like, Marxist or communist government would look like. Like, because once you are a politician, like, in my head, it feels like a politician and, like, the working class. Like, a politician is not a member of the working class, but I guess that is just because I'm so used to this, like, capitalist state of being, right? I know you know of any single person presiding over everything? Right, gotcha. Like, it would quite literally, I suppose, be, like, of the people, for the people, by the people, like, but, you know, for real this time, I suppose. What am I saying here? Oh. This is what's commonly called economic self-determination, an inalienable and imprescriptible right of all peoples, which stipulates that in case of nationalization, compensation will be paid in accordance with the norms in the force which stipulates in the case of nationalization, compensation will be paid in accordance with the norms and force in the country that proceeds with the nationalization. Gotcha. So they get to choose how they pay their compensation, basically. There is no state in communism as a community. Yeah, that is an interesting like, that is definitely a very alien concept to me, right? Like, all of my like, upbringing and all of, like, my experience of just, like, really only being able to see, like, the current system as, like, the way that things happen, it makes it hard for me to conceptualize something like that. You know what I mean? I'm not even saying it in the sense of, like, oh, I hate that, it sounds awful. It just literally is, like, it sounds so different to me that I don't understand it, you know? Like, I think I definitely need to read a lot more about, like, what communism is before I can understand, before I can actually have, like, some idea of what that means, in terms of how a system runs, if you, like, don't have a state, quote unquote. Socialism, however, does allow for states. Sure. Is that, like, the primary difference between the two, would you say? Or, I guess it's probably a really huge difference, right? But is that, because I feel like, yeah, like, one of the other things that is confusing is, like, like, socialism versus communism, like, what is that, right? Not having a state is why liberals, not conservatives, use the it doesn't work large scale counterpoint. Right, sure. I mean, liberals are conservatives for all intents and purposes, right? Liberals they fundamentally believe in, you could actually argue that liberals are, like, the true conservatives, right? They arguably believe in the current system as it stands and are more just about making small tweaks, you know, kicking out bad apples, things like that. Whereas, like, a lot of what we would currently, like, a lot of people would call conservatives today, like, are often so far right that they are actually not conserving the system. They are, like, changing it drastically, but, like, in the direction of, like a more, like, fascistic or, like, like either Christian nationalist or whatever, or, like, just generally theocratic, or other such direction, right? Like, at least, maybe I don't know the definition of conservatism either, but usually I would think of conservatism as wanting to, like, not like just the status quo, right? Like a conservative wants to maintain the status quo. They like things how they are, and they want to keep them how they are. At least to me, a liberal seems like the most prominent example of that, right? They are quote unquote lay rational centrists, but in reality, they are more. They're like, you know, they're right leaning or just straight up right wing, depending on which country you're in. But their goal is just mostly to just keep things exactly the same. Usually, maybe that's not right. Maybe that's not a correct conception. But there is not a huge difference between a liberal and a conservative generally, right? In terms of both of them are, at least from a leftist point of view, right? The liberal might be less actively harmful, like in the short term, though. So maybe I say conservative in the sense of like the canonical use of conservative, or not canonical, but like the colloquial use of conservative, which is like Donald Trump or something, right? Which I'm not even sure. Again, that's my point. Like, I don't know if Donald Trump like counts, you know? Like, I think he's like too far right, maybe, but that is true, Faf. That's a good point. I think American conservatives want to conserve the system, but remember the system used to be way less equitable and liberal, and that's why at least brown and gay people can have some rights. I see what you mean. Like, yeah. It's right. It's conservative, but it is conserving like a system from like not the current system. Like it is almost, it's restorative. They want to restore a system that has like slowly been chipped away at by like civil rights movements and shit like that, right? I see what you mean. Like maybe a liberal wants to maintain the current system, and a conservative wants to like they've always wanted to maintain the system that we had, like, you know, secret, like fucking 200 years ago or something, and they're like working to restore that, and they've just been slowly losing ground, I guess, right? Slowly. I'll also say they're both conservative, right? That's actually a very interesting. That's a good way to separate it. I think. I don't think I had like a good conception of that. You'd never guess what the far right party in the UK is called. Is that the Nigel Farage one? Is it, are they Reform? They're Reform UK, right? Because yeah, they want to restore. They want to restore what used to be. Maybe even, you could argue, they want to make America great again. They want to make the UK great. Yeah. The Rupert Lowe one? Oh, is that not even the far right one? I thought that was the far right one. Is it just called like Conserve UK or something? Who's like a true conservative though, with an actual love of the past and an image of something that never existed? I don't know, man. I don't like. I have even less interest in purity testing conservatives than I do in purity testing leftists. I don't know, Christopher Nolan. Maybe. Right? Maybe? Nigel Farage's Reform Party is the far right one. There's a fringe one further to the right that exists just kind of to push reform even further right. That is crazy. All right, let's keep going. Let's try and finish off this chapter, and then maybe we'll finish stream here. What was I looking at? Oh yeah, the country that is doing the nationalization gets to decide the terms of it. The U.S. did not like those terms, but that is not in accordance with international law for whatever that counts for. In accordance with Article 308 of the International Court of Justice, the first source of law one should refer to in the case of conflict between nations, in the process of expropriations, for example. Sorry, my throat's getting a little dry. Are international treaties. Makes sense? Now, for the period 1959 to 62, no international treaty existed between Cuba and the U.S. that might bear on this question. Okay, so that's the first source exhausted. We must look, therefore, to an international custom for evidence of a general practice accepted as law. In Latin America, Mexican nationalization in 1917, Bolivian in 1952, and Guatemalan in 1953 were made based on recognized international law and accepted as the inalienable sovereign right of states for which every people has permanent sovereignty over its natural resources. Moreover, according to Resolution 1803 of the United Nations, dated December 14th, 1962, concerning permanent sovereignty over natural resources, it is stipulated that the, quote, right of permanent sovereignty of peoples and nations over their riches and their natural resources should be exercised in the interest of national development as well as being of the state, and the well-being of the state involved, end quote. It's a long sentence. The right of permanent sovereignty of peoples and nations over their riches and their natural resources should be exercised in the interest of national development and the well-being of the state involved. thus recognizes the sovereign right of states to nationalize foreign assets that reside on their territory. That sounds, yeah, it doesn't sound like a, yeah. Peoples and nations have a right over their resources, and they should be exercised in the interest of national development and the well-being of the state involved. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be twisting those words. That seems to be what that's saying. The Charter of Economic Rights and Duties of States, approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 12, 1974, also stipulates that all states have the rights to nationalize, expropriate, or transfer ownership of foreign property, in which case appropriate compensation should be paid by the state adopting such measures, taking into account its relevant laws and regulations and all circumstances the state considers pertinent. In any case where the question of compensation gives rise to a controversy, it shall be settled under the democratic law of the nationalizing state and by its tribunals. I mean, very clear that the state doing the nationalization gets to decide how this shit works, right? A definition for fascism I've heard was palingenetic ultra-nationalism. Hyper-exclusive nationalism using the concept of a mythical rebirth as a motivating force. What the fuck is palingenetic? Palingenesis. An adjective that means related to palingenesis, which translates to a rebirth, regeneration, or recreation. Sure. Birth again, I see. Palingenesis. Again, birth. Core of fascism. British theorist Roger Griffin used to describe the central myth of fascism, the belief that the nation must suffer a radical revolutionary cleansing or destruction before rising up from the ashes in a grand political rebirth. This is interesting, right? Just from a very ground up. This is kind of what I'm saying, in that a fascist does not seem to strike me as a conservative, in the sense that they are also revolutionaries in a way, just like maybe in a way that is significantly harmful, right? But this is, like, purely in terms of their view on, like, the current status quo, this feels a lot more, not in the sense that, like, they share ideas or anything, but just in the sense that, like, the level of dissatisfaction with the way things are and the motivation to do something drastic to change it, right? This, like, that idea, like, must suffer a radical revolutionary, well, maybe not cleansing or destruction, but like a radical revolutionary change. This feels a lot more similar to, like, a extreme leftist than, like, a liberal. You know what I mean? That's kind of my point with what I was saying earlier. In the sense of, like, most liberals, or, lowercase c conservatives maybe, are not interested in any kind of revolution or, magnificent rebirth or anything like that. Like, they just they're not interested in any kind of significant change to their world, is my understanding. But sure, yes, the company doing the nationalization gets to decide how the nationalization goes. Even if people don't like it, they gotta do it within their own internal tribunals and laws and shit like that. Fascism is very radical, yes. Thus, under the international public law initiated in 1959, the process of expropriation, non-discriminatory since it concerns all foreign assets, that's a good point too, it's not like they were targeting the US in particular or something, it's just that the US happened to have a larger foreign interest than everyone else, respected the legal agreements in force. Having been recognized as legitimate by the bulk of all nations with assets in Cuba, the compensation offered was accepted. Indeed, 5 agreements relating to the payment of claims were held in Cuba, with France and the Helvetic Confederation in March 1967, the UK in October 78, Canada in November 1980, and Spain in January 1988. That is a huge gap in between there, right? How I use conservative as a word nowadays is different from its definition, as with many things. That's fair. Yeah, that is a huge gap. 21 years between, the first one and the last one. Only the US government rejected the compensation process. I wonder what happens, like, what does it look like for Spain between the 50s, when this was, like, when these, like, expropriations were first happening, and 88 when they accepted? Were they also just, like, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what that looks like. I assume that means they didn't accept it right away, right? Or maybe they did, but it wasn't, like, formalized? Because it does say only the US government rejected the compensation process. Maybe it was just more like it took a long time for it to, like, formally become agreed upon. But, like, Spain wasn't like, fuck you, I hate this. They were just kind of like, maybe it wasn't a priority for them or something. I don't know. It's just such a long time period, though, right? Like we're talking, it's like a 30-year lag. But I mean, governments do just like move really fucking slow sometimes, right? Only the U.S. government rejected the compensation process. Yeah, I mean, that is quite something. Okay, so the next chapter is about, it's the biggest chapter in the book, I think, and it is regarding economic sanctions from Dwight D. Eisenhower to Barack Obama. It stops at Barack Obama because this book was written in 2013, and how relevant it still is. But I think what I'm gonna do, so that you're not just staring at a sexy picture of Che Guevara with a cigar in his mouth next time, I think I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to do some reading and just prepare some bullet points to have a visual to talk about here, and then maybe I can just pull up, like, I'll pre-read a little bit, we can discuss it, and then we can go from there, right? Just gotta think this is a little more scuffed than I would otherwise like it to be. But yeah, that was interesting. I mean, so far, really my main questions. When are you gonna tackle feminism, Brick? You know, one piece, one step at a time. I have a very good video to watch. Sure. Certainly, we gotta educate ourselves on all. There's all sorts of, you know, intersectional angles to this shit, right? Like right now, this is very much like a kind of imperialism and like capitalism versus communism type deal. But there's gonna be a lot of, I think as far as like moving on to a country, I think we can certainly, Cuba right now is of interest. I mean, it's currently topical, obviously, but also it is just based on that boy video that I watched. It kind of inspired me to start doing all this shit in the first place. But I think eventually I might just turn the lens inwards, and we can start doing a lot of like Canadian analysis. And I mean, we can do that from all sorts of different angles, right? I don't know much about my own country's history, unfortunately, right? Well, the country I moved to. I actually don't know much about Egypt's history either, but I know a little bit more than Canada, probably. But yeah, like, we can talk about that from like a feminist lens, from like an anti-black lens, right? Just general, I mean, not just anti-black racism, but a lot of racism in general, right? We can also see how they reacted to McCarthyism, and I'm sure it wasn't too great. So, well, you know, all things in due time. When we get there, I will certainly, you know, I'll take any kind of recommendations at all times, right? England's history also, I mean, yeah, certainly very relevant to, unfortunately, certainly very relevant to the world at large, right? A lot of these, like, you know, especially the US and England, right? A lot of these large imperial powers are often the root causes of a lot of shit, right? No one asked how the Zionist project got started in the first place. Or at least how, you know, the Israelis actually got to Palestine. But yeah, I think we'll call it there for now. And I will come a little bit more prepared tomorrow. Because unfortunately, I was like, I'm just gonna read this book, and then I was like, wait a second, I can't do that. But I had the realization that I can't do that like 30 minutes before I went live. So now that I know, I have some pre-knowledge, then I can prepare and discuss this. Maybe I'll do a quick summary of chapter 1 as well, and then I'll read chapter 2 and 3. Maybe, I don't know how long it'll take to talk about stuff. Maybe I'll just read it all in advance and we get as far through it as we do. You know. For now, have a wonderful rest of your day. And yeah, man, very very different kind of stream. If you've been around for a while. I do appreciate the folks who are sticking around, and we'll see, man. We'll get better at it as we go. You got to be bad at something in terms of like the general format and everything. You got to be bad at something first before you get good at something. And in terms of like my lack of education, you got to not know about stuff to know about stuff. No one is born knowing everything about anything, right? For now, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace.